No, 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 you're looking in the wrong direction. You shouldn't be looking along in that direction, there's nothing there. This is the real telephone. Well, I'm sorry, a bit of a corny way to start the programme, I know. But there is a serious point to it. Of course, the serious point is that there's something rather funny about this plate. You know from the main text, of course, that it's a hologram. In this case, it perhaps isn't very convincing. It was a bit dim. We're using rather dim illumination. But nevertheless, there was no way of you telling that it wasn't a three-dimensional image until you saw me, all three of us together. Now, the key to a hologram is that it's a bit like a diffraction grating. And when you play back the diffraction grating, you produce a field which is identical to the field which would have been produced by the real object. Of course, to make this diffraction grating, you have to interfere the light which comes from the object with reference beam light. This you know from the main text. The simplest sort of interference I can produce is two plane waves, and that produces the simplest sort of diffraction grating, a sinusoidal grating. More complicated objects produces a more complicated diffraction grating. Now, it would be nice to actually see these fringes, but the trouble is they're microscopic. I show you some photographs in the text, and I try to convince you by mathematics that it really works, but it would have been nice for you to see them for yourselves. Unfortunately, it needs rather a high-powered microscope in order to see them, and really you can do with a rather more high-powered laser. So what we've done instead is we've set that experiment up over here in the studio. The microscope's over there, and here's the laser, 15 milliwatts in this case. I'm expanding the beam with a couple of lenses here, and the expanded beam falls on this glass plate, which is acting as a beam splitter. Some of the light's reflected off the front face, some of the light goes straight through and strikes this mirror, and is also reflected down here. So I have two beams coming off in this direction, and if I put a card in the way, you can see how these two beams converge to overlap down here through a prism into the objective plane of the microscope. Of course, we're not looking down the microscope, we've got a camera, a TV camera looking at the fringes, and they're projected up here on the monitor, jittering about because of vibration problems. We've tried to get rid of it by using concrete slabs and tires and the usual box of tricks, but they still jitter around. Now, let me just convince you that that really is caused by the overlapping of the two beams. If I block off one of the beams, there we are, fringes disappear. Reappear, disappear. Fine. Well, now the other thing that we said in the unit was that the frequency of the fringes depends on the angle at which the beams overlap. Now, that angle depends on the spacing here, because of course the beams are going down like that. If I widen up this spacing, we get a bigger angle and correspondingly narrower fringes. So the obvious thing to do is move the mirror back and see whether or not the fringes actually close up. So let me do that. So we start off with the coarse fringes, and I pull the mirror back. Of course, the fringes disappear as soon as I pull the mirror back because, well, nerves do a terrible thing to the vibrations. Realign it and take my hands out, and sure enough, the fringes are now finer than they were. They settle down after vibrations. I should be able to pull it back a bit further and make them even finer still. Let me do that. And there we are, finer still. The vibration problem shows up very easily if I tap this mirror like this, when they jitter around and settle down again as the vibrations die away. Let me go back to the coarse position because that's the most interesting position. Let me do that. And there we are with the coarse fringes again. Well, of course, that's just two simple ways interfering with each other. In order to get a hologram, I need to put some object in one of the beams. And the object I've chosen is a nice simple phase object, a glass bottle stopper. If I put this in one of the beams, then it should diffract the light in that beam so that we have an ordinary plane wave interfering with the diffracted light from this bottle stopper. Consequently, well, we see the fringes are modulated. They're not the nice clean furrows that they were before, they've been distorted. Well, that's fine, that's a holographic setup. And in actual fact, it's not that much different from the setup that we've asked you to use in the home kit. That is the holobox setup. I've got the holobox here, and you can see that if you think of the laser light coming in this direction, then we have a beam splitter here. So some of the light goes straight through and falls on the objects, and then comes onto the film plane, and some of the light is reflected off the other face of the beam splitter, goes up to the mirror, which is here, and is then reflected across to the film plane again. So reference beam light to the beam splitter, to the mirror, across to the film plane, object light across the object, and back to the film plane. So you can see that the two setups are very similar. But of course, we don't normally want to make holograms on 35mm film, nor do we normally want to make holograms of miniature chess pieces. It would be really nice for display holograms to make them large scale of real live objects. So I think this is a place where we ought to go off and see a really professional setup and see just what you can do when you try. Take a look at this hologram. Pretty good, isn't it? Ah, but you might say, how do I know that really is a hologram I'm looking at? And I've got to admit, that's a pretty good question, because I've still got the object here in the field of view. This could just be a glass plate. You could just be looking through the glass plate at the object. So how can I prove to you that it really was a hologram you were looking at? Well, this is where I do my conjuring trick. Nothing up my sleeves. I'm going to put my hand in and grab one of the bishops and lift it up. How many bishops? If I put the bishop back again, how many bishops? Let me take it out once more. And put it back once more. We really do have a hologram image and the real object light. So I could have blocked off the light which was illuminating the object and you'd still have seen them. It really is a hologram. Now this is the sort of hologram you can make if you do go to town on fancy emulsions and getting all your optical paths nicely lined up and nice clean laser beams, lots of power. So I thought it'd be nice to actually look at the system we use to make this hologram. Well, the source of light, an argon laser, which can turn out, 30 watts if you really want to, but we're using it about 1 watt level at the moment. The green light comes out at the end of the laser and is turned immediately to a right angle by a mirror. Let's pick the path up from that point. The beam strikes another mirror and is deflected through another right angle. And as we follow the path down, we come to this black box here. Now this black box is a beam splitter. You can see some of the lights going more or less straight on, and as we move down, we can see that that hits a diverging lens. The diverging lens spreads the light onto this big grey mirror. It doesn't look too much like a mirror from that side, but it's actually deflecting the light back down onto the objects. Let's track back now to the beam splitter and look at the other path. The other path comes out at a right angle to the first one, strikes yet another mirror, and is deflected way across to another mirror still, and from that mirror onto another diverging lens, which fans the light out to strike the hologram plate. Now that's our reference light, or in this case, our playback light. Well, this is the sort of system which would have been used for making your home kit hologram. So while we've actually got the system handy, let's see what your home kit hologram looks like played back through this particular argon laser system. It works just as well in green light. You don't need the red light, the helium neon red light that you're using. Green does just as well, and it works in exactly the same way. Look, at the moment we're in focus on the magnifying glass. If we pull the camera focus back, the stopwatch comes into focus. The magnifying glass goes out of focus, and we can go back again to the magnifying glass, and the stopwatch goes out of focus. It's working exactly the same way as before. There's the parallax effect there as well. In fact, I actually find it quite helpful to think of the hologram plate as being composed of all these little photographic grains. And concentrate on one grain in the top left-hand corner. Well, if you think of that grain as being a detector of the optical field when you make the hologram, and then a regenerator of the optical field when you play it back, it can only detect and regenerate from this viewpoint. Whereas if you go to a different grain, over here, say, the top right-hand corner on the photographic plate, then it detects and plays back from this different viewpoint. If you put all the different points together, then you get all the different viewpoints. Now, that's why you can see the parallax effect. But you know from the units that there's a real image as well which we can produce, an image which is projected out in front of the plate. And the reason I've mentioned that is because I can play that back with a very small, narrow, parallel beam of laser light. And I can then sample different points of the plate. And when I sample them, then we'll see this viewpoint effect. So let me take this out now and shove it over in this parallel beam path which I've set up down here. There it is in position. If I just unmask this parallel beam of light, I've got a very small spot of light falling on the hologram plate now, projecting a real image forward onto a ground glass screen. That's what you're looking at. Don't worry about the black square there. That's just obscuring the straight-through light. It would blind the cameras otherwise. I've got the hologram clamped at the moment. Let me undo it and move it about a bit so you can see the effect. I'm looking at sampling the right part of the hologram. I move across and sample the left part of the hologram. I move up and sample the top of the hologram. I move down and sample the bottom of the hologram. Notice that the viewpoints change correspondingly, a right viewpoint, a left viewpoint, above and below. Well, that was with a narrow parallel beam of light. Let me clamp the hologram back in again and open up the aperture so I have a much wider beam of light. I can do that here with the aperture stop. And now, a lot of the image has gone out of focus. In fact, let me tweak up the position of the hologram plate. Is the magnifying glass about in focus there? Now, let's think about this. The magnifying glass, the stopwatch. The stopwatch is behind the magnifying glass, isn't it? So if the magnifying glass is in focus at the moment, which way do I move the plate to get the stopwatch in focus? Backwards? Well, I'm going to move it forwards. And lo and behold, the stopwatch comes into focus. Well, there's something pretty peculiar about that image, but you've already met this idea. It's the idea of pseudoscopy, the idea that the image is turned inside out on itself, that what was at the front goes to the back and what was at the back goes to the front, yet with this still very peculiar property that what's at the front is obscuring what's at the back. Well, it's a shame that, because just think of the potential of a display hologram. I mean, just imagine the jeweler's shop window. And out of this jeweler's shop window hangs the hand dangling the diamond necklace tantalizingly in front of your eyes. It's no good if the thing's inside out. Well, we can get around it, because if you think about it, this can be used as an object, a pseudoscopic object. The light which has been converged down to this image diverges away from it. I can put another photographic plate in here, add in reference light, and make a second hologram. Now, if I make that second hologram, because my object was pseudoscopic, the real and the virtual images will be interchanged, in the sense that the real image will be the one which is normal, orthoscopic is the technical term, whereas the virtual image will be the one that's peculiar. Let me just go over that again. Playback light strikes the first hologram from the left and forms a real but pseudoscopic image in front of the plate. The light continues to diverge on from there. Now, normally, you'd put your eye there and see this real but pseudoscopic image. Suppose you take the eye out and replace it with another photographic plate, and then add in reference light. Here we've done it with a prism. Then we will have made a second hologram using the real but pseudoscopic image as the object. This is the hologram we then play back and manage to produce an orthoscopic projected image. Well, we've got a hologram which has been made like that. If it's the virtual image that's peculiar on this hologram, it'd be interesting to have a look at that first. If I put on the laser light, and I pick the hologram up carefully, and rotate it, and rotate it back again. Now, to me, that looks as though when the head shell moves one way, the body of the telephone moves the other way. In fact, your eyes just don't like this pseudoscopic nature. They tend to interpret the thing in terms of a rotation of the object. But of course, the hologram wasn't designed to be played back like this. Let's put it in the way it was designed to be played back. Flip it over. Oh, scared stiff of dropping that thing. Drop it in. And there's the image the right way around. Looks fantastic to me, and if we put the lights down, it looks even better still. The phone is now projecting well out in front of the plate. In fact, I can put my finger on the front of the phone and I can move it up towards the button. Except I'm touching the plate. I can't actually get to the button now. It's behind the plate. Part of the image is in front and part behind. Come back down to the front again. You can almost dial numbers on this phone. 9 and so on. Well, we've managed to solve our jeweler's shop window problem. In fact, we've done even better than that because this system is actually being illuminated from above. So we don't have to worry about the light getting in your eyes. You tend to move your head from side to side, so you tend not to look up in that direction. You have to get pretty low to see it. Perfect. All we need to do is hologram the diamond necklace. But there's still a snag. The snag is most jewelers' shops don't have argon lasers. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually manage to play back a hologram like this in white light? Like so. This is certainly a hologram because we've got parallax in there. And we also are playing it back in white light. How come? Well, let's just check we've still got vertical parallax. If we move the camera up, I reckon there's no vertical parallax there. As we go down, still no vertical parallax, but there's a change of colour. And that's the crux of the matter. Basically, we've sacrificed the vertical parallax in order to allow us to play the hologram back in white light. Now, that's right, as you can understand if I explain how we made this hologram. Basically, it's rather like the projection hologram. We took a master and we produced the real image in front of the plate. But we didn't use the whole plate. We only used one horizontal strip of the plate. We threw away the vertical parallax. We then allowed this object to fall onto a new hologram plate, this one, added in the reference beam at a vertical angle of inclination. When we come to play it back, we produce either a real or virtual image of this second hologram plate, but in addition to that, we also have a real image of the slit. So if you play it back in one color, laser light, then you can only see the image when you look through that slit. Above it or below it, it disappears because there's no vertical parallax. But because we added in the light at a vertical angle of inclination, we have a whole series of horizontal fringes. The carrier fringes are horizontal. So the plate behaves rather like a diffraction grating. So with white light, as the light comes down, the beam comes straight through, but we then get the spread of colours that you always get with a diffraction grating. Blue being bent least, red most. Consequently, when you move the camera up and down, you see not one slit, but a whole sequence of slits, all different colours. Well, we can play holograms back in white light, it would appear. And the thing is, when you get to this stage, there's always a temptation to go one step further, and what is the next step? How about making holograms in white light? It would be nice to actually produce holograms without the laser beam. All right, it's impossible, I know. We've hammered it home in the broadcast notes, in the units, that you can't do that. You need coherent light in order to do it. Are you sure? Just bear with me for a second. I sit in a swivel chair, and you take an ordinary photograph of me, white light photograph, from that angle. Click. I rotate to a new angle, and you take a second photograph of me. Suppose I go all the way around the circle, taking a photograph, say, every degree, finishing up with 360 photographs. Wouldn't you agree that in those 360 photographs, I've got all the pertinent three-dimensional information about me? The only trouble is you can't see 360 photographs all at once. What we need is some way of putting them all together, some way of being able to look at these 360 photographs all at once. There is a way. let me think about this in a bit more detail. Suppose I've got this strip of 35mm film with a whole sequence of frames on it, each frame showing a different angular aspect of the subject. I can play this film back through a projector, one frame at a time, but a projector with a difference, because we've removed the normal white light source and replaced it with a source of coherent light, with a laser. We now collect this projected light with a specially designed cylindrical lens, which is oriented so that it forms a vertical, almost one-dimensional slit image of the two-dimensional film frame. We then record this vertical slit on a photographic plate placed in the image plane of the cylindrical lens. But if we also add in coherently related reference beam, inclined vertically with respect to the slit image, we form not a simple photograph of the slit, but a slit hologram. Of course, we can now move the hologram plate round a notch, repeat the whole process for the next frame in the sequence, and project this new frame through the cylindrical lens and form a second slit hologram adjacent to the first. If we do this with all 360 degrees worth of film, then we get a whole series of slits next to each other. And if you look closely at this hologram, you can see those slits. We call this multiplexing because, in effect, we have put lots of information channels into the one hologram. Now, if you look at the image again, you'll see that this is rainbow color, as in the previous case. And again, as before, it's simply because we're using white light illumination. There's a car headlamp bulb down at the bottom of this cylinder. Well, that's fine. We've now got rid of the laser recording situation. We did an ordinary photographic recording. That takes away the problems of laser light falling on people. We've regenerated the hologram process to a processing stage between recording and playback. But even more, we could have used movie film. Instead of static film in that swivel chair, I could have moved. And consequently, on the hologram, you'd have seen movement. And I think I can show you that if you concentrate on the image while we turn down the lights, and I rotate the hologram for you. The girl is not only solidly three-dimensional, but she also moves. And round about here, she gets just a little saucy. Well, you might be quite happy with girls winking at you, but once you get movement into the hologram, just think of the potential that opens up.